Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. The corn had learned to breathe. It rose and fell in the moonlit dark, a slow tide of stalks exhaling fog over the black soil behind the cemetery fence. Sarah Dunn should have turned back at the painted plywood reaper that marked the hayride path, but the town's festival was loud with laughter, and she wanted the quiet. She told herself the field was just a field, even in Pumpkin Hollow. Even on Halloween Eve, her boots crackled through husks. The smell of cold dirt and smoke from distant chimneys drifted over the rows. The wind hiccuped, the scythes of dried leaves shivered. Somewhere a crow made a sound like a hinge. The breathing stopped. Silence stretched tight. Then, close, too close, the stalks parted with a wet peel. Something tall unlatched from the dark. A head the color of embers lifted above the tassels, a pumpkin pitted and rotting, a jag of light grinning from within. Vines knotted to a rib-thin chest creaked as they tightened. The thing cocked its glowing head like a curious dog. The smell of it, sweet rot, lantern smoke, rolled over her. "Hello?" Sarah managed, which was a prayer until it wasn't. The pumpkin's grin widened. The rows closed behind her like a door. Vines coiled her shins, her waist, her throat, the touch cold as cellar air. She clawed at them, found thorns. The creature leaned in until the world was orange and hot, until her breath fogged the inside of its grin. Its voice arrived like wind through a grave, a whisper made of dirt. You spoke the words. Sarah's mouth opened in a soundless apology to no one. The creature lifted her off her toes as easily as a coat from a hook. The moon glanced off something slick and black, a nail, a thorn, a claw. She didn't see the rest. The corn sighed once more as it swallowed her back down. By morning, the scarecrow at the corn's edge wore her ribbon like a scarf. Pumpkin Hollow in late October always pretended it was a postcard from itself. Orange lights veined the maples on Main. Shop windows were painted with grinning gourds and witches mid-cackle. The radio by the hardware store hissed synth notes and drum machines between ads for candied apples, and the parade, even the cold, felt decorated. Lyra slung her duffel from the trunk and let it drop. "God, they doubled the decorations," she said, black lipstick catching the morning. Her denim jacket was patched in old band logos. A Walkman bulged her pocket. Her hair smelled faintly of bonfire. "Tripled," Bram said, shouldering his parents' VHS camcorder like a newsman, grin defaulting to crooked. "If a pumpkin sneezes in this town, someone sells tickets." Gunnar pushed his glasses up, a paperback sticking out of his flannel, Regional Folklore and Harvest Rites. There was a line for the haunted feed mill at 9 a.m., the line. Juno watched the square with her steady eyes, the way the bunting snapped, the way the old men at the coffee counter stared a second too long. She was the quiet gravity of them, shoulders strong, palms open. "It's just family weekend," she said. We eat too much, pretend we like one another, then leave with leftover pie. They'd scattered after graduation, college towns, dorms, cafeteria coffee that tasted like pennies. 19 made the roads longer. But Pumpkin Hollow was a clock they all still set by, and coming home clicked something into place, until Lyra noticed the flyers tacked to every pole. Harvest chant, volunteers needed, elders circle, by invitation only. "Since when is the chant a volunteer gig?" Bram said. "Is there a sign-up sheet? Do we get a t-shirt?" Gunnar didn't laugh. "The chant's never been public. It's an elders thing, back to the first settlers. It keeps the story where it belongs." "And where's that?" Lyra asked. Gunnar's gaze drifted to the corn beyond the hill, where fog lay like a blanket wrung out to dry. "In the ground." The cemetery fence was iron crooked as fingers. The hill it guarded sloped into rows of stones with dates that began and ended in the same century. Juno swung a leg over and dropped into grass soaked with dew. The others followed, Bram narrating like a late-night host into his dead camcorder, voice half joke, half warding charm. Gunnar led them to a crypt with its name worn blank by weather. He crouched, pried up a loose stone where moss had more grip than mortar, and drew out a leather journal tied with a red string gone brown. "Dad kept it," he said softly. Said his father kept it, said it wasn't ours, just ours to hold. They sat with their backs to the stone. Lyra flicked her lighter open and cupped the flame, its coal orange eye steady in the gray. Gunnar untied the string. The pages breathed dust, ink had bled, cramped hands had scrawled over margins with recipes for keeping things asleep, salt lines, lantern placements, words written in a hand that tried to be careful and failed. Gunnar found the page he'd dog-eared in his mind for years without reading, the binding of the field. He read aloud. The words were old in the mouth, the consonants like teeth. The wind raised its shoulders. Lyra's lighter went long and thin. Bram's grin collapsed. Juno's jaw ticked once and set. And so by blood remembered and breath withheld, by seed unsown and hunger kept, we bind thee to thy furrow. The earth popped, a sound like a knuckle cracking under the whole yard. "Stop," Juno said. Gunnar stopped. The air didn't. Between the rows, soil lifted like something beneath it was breathing. The nearest stone settled a fraction. From the fence came the slowest sound, metal warming without heat. Lyra closed the journal. The wind stopped on a dime. What replaced it was listening. "Okay," Bram whispered. "So we don't read Latin out loud over cursed dirt. Lesson learned." "Wasn't Latin," Gunnar said, small. "What was it?" Lyra asked. Gunnar swallowed. "Ours." Fog moved in one piece like a curtain. Beyond it, the corn line leaned toward them. For a moment it was only wind, then the fog had a shape. Something tall paused at the fence and looked in, the glow of its head banked and watchful, like coals deciding if they were still fire. They held still, 4 coins in an unseen palm. The thing tilted its head. The journal in Gunnar's hands grew heavier, every loop of every letter a nail. The pumpkin's grin sharpened. It didn't cross, not yet. It only lifted a hand of vines and tapped the fence once, twice, the sound thin as a ring on a glass. Then it turned back to the corn with the calm of a door closing. The wind exhaled. The teens didn't. "We didn't finish the chant," Lyra said. Gunnar nodded like a confession. "We opened it." Pumpkin Hollow did what it always did with fear. It threw a parade. By dusk, Main Street pulsed with color. Paper lanterns floated on strings between buildings, faces painted in cutout smiles. Kids wore plastic vampire teeth that clicked. The high school drumline stitched everything together with a practiced thrum. On the gazebo, Mrs. Crenshaw tuned her theremin for the 9th year running. The mayor waved from a flatbed stacked with hay bales and trophies carved from gourds. From certain corners, the decorations looked wrong. Jack-o'-lantern smiles were cut just a little too wide. The hay smelled not sweet but sour. The fog hanging at ankle height wasn't from the fog machine on the feed store porch. The elders in their chairs by the coffee counter watched the corn and not the parade. Sarah's ribbon fluttered from the scarecrow at the field edge, and if you looked twice, you noticed the knot had been tied by a shaking hand. "Do we tell someone?" Bram asked. He had stopped joking the moment the fence rang. "Like the mayor, the cops, Father Donahue, the Ghostbusters?" "We tell each other," Juno said. "We stay together." Lyra's eyes were on a side street where the fog pooled, thick as milk. "We make it to dawn." Gunnar carried the journal like contraband and consulted it like a compass. There were notes on unbinding. There were warnings on price. At the first float, the drumline's rhythm stumbled. A snare hiccuped, then resumed. Hush rolled the way a wave rolls, fast and total. The fog on Main crossed itself, the lanterns dimmed, and then, without bulbs changing, glowed a deeper, meaner orange. The corn had reached the curb. Vines slipped into town like black ropes, draped around porch rails, tasted doorknobs, stroked ankles. From the second-story windows, hands twitched curtains back. The elders stood in unison like strings had pulled them and began to hum a note that was neither key nor melody but something older, a line a plow makes in wet ground. The theremin shrieked, the first scream followed. Pumpkinhead stepped into Main Street as if it owned the bricks. It stood taller than the float's arch and thinner than a scarecrow had any right to be. Its head lit the rain of fog. Its grin held heat like an oven door. It turned to face the crowd. 100 plastic vampire teeth rattled to the pavement. For a beat too long, everyone pretended it was part of the show. Then the vines moved like nets. People ran, some didn't. The creature didn't chase. It collected, patient, methodical, folding the town into itself. It did not cross the stoop of the church, but it pressed its head to the doors and breathed, and the wood darkened in the shape of its grin. "Church," Juno said. "Now." They ran. The church smelled like lemon polish and dust and the old kind of prayer. Stained glass washed the pews in sunset colors that had forgotten they weren't true. The elders were already there. They had moved with the quiet speed of people who practiced moving. Old Mr. Pike spoke without preamble, voice ruined by smoke and time. "You read it." Gunnar held the journal like a burned thing. We didn't finish. You didn't have to, Mrs. Crenshaw said softly, her theremin case set neatly against the aisle. Words remember the shape of mouths that spoke them. You made the shape. Bram's voice came out thin. So how do we unmake it? The elder's eyes slid toward the back, where a portrait hung of a woman in a high collar with a face that could make milk curdle. Agnes Tolliver, founder. Beneath it, a framed scrap of something browned with age, ink gone to ghosts. It was a copy of the chant, half blot, half warning. Mrs. Crenshaw nodded to the glass. We keep him bound with a circle of names and a trade we honor. The field eats to stay asleep, blood to ground, hunger to rest. Your words pulled the nail. Juno looked up at the stained glass of St. Michael standing on something that looked suspiciously like a squash. Trade what? Memory, Mr. Pike said. We give the field what it thinks it wants and leave with less than we came with. Our elders chose that loss. We chose it for our children. His eyes found Gunnar. Your father held the journal. Did he tell you why he could never remember the day after Halloween? Gunnar's breath caught. He had childhoods he could not find. A season smelled like smoke with no day attached to it. No. Lyra's jaw set. We're not feeding it. Mrs. Crenshaw's voice stayed kind and cut anyway. We always do, dear, or it takes anyway. Bram paced, hands in his hair, laughed dead. So the options are forget who we are on purpose or get eaten by a salad with teeth. Gunnar flipped pages with his thumb. There's another way, he said, like a person jumping through a window and hoping the ground was close. He pointed at a margin note written in a younger hand, counterbind, seed denied, root cut, hunger starved by harvest undone. We break the idea of harvest, we unsow. Juno frowned. In a town that worships it. Exactly, Gunnar said. We ruin the parade. Lyra's mouth curved. Finally, a plan I can get behind. The plan looked like vandalism because it was. Toppled displays, smashed corn shocks, cords yanked from fog machines so the false mist dispersed and the real one was easier to see. Bram used the dead camcorder as a club. Lyra lit fireworks from a pocketful she definitely wasn't supposed to have and flung them into the air one after another. Noise and light ripping holes in the parade's trance. Juno set her shoulder to the trophy table and shoved, gourds rolling like skulls. At first it felt like treason. Then it felt like oxygen. Every banner that fell loosened something. Every lantern shattered, bled color out of the creature's grin. The fog hissed, annoyed, as if pulled by wires. The town's mask broke, and beneath it the bones of it showed. Old bricks, old hurt, old bargains. Pumpkinhead turned, confused. Its vines reached for what had fed it. Symbols, ritual, habit, and found only splinters. The elders stood at the church doors and began the true chant, not the one from the parade brochures, not the rhyme taught to school children, but the ugly one that made the stained glass go dark for a breath. Gunnar read in counterpoint. Lyra banged on the hollow of a float until it rang like a bell. Bram laughed once, wild and real. Juno found the scarecrow at the field's lip and tore Sarah's ribbon free, lifted it like a flag, and drove the stake through the hard, cold soil. The corn heaved like a creature trying to wake and failing. Pumpkinhead took a step toward them that sounded like wood tearing it reached. Juno stepped to meet it. She was the peacekeeper because she understood where lines were, and this was hers. She planted her boots, hands down at her sides, chin up as the pumpkin face leaned close. She smelled her father's workshop in its heat, the way he'd burned designs into cedar with a hot nail. She didn't flinch. "Not our town," she said, and the words were not brave. They were fact. The creature hesitated. Hunger is not intelligent, but it recognizes will like a fence. Behind it, the corn began to lie down. The sky came up bruised and then clear, as if someone had scrubbed it hard. Smoke from ruined floats dribbled into blue. The elders' chant guttered out to hums, to breath, to silence. The town was not fine. Nothing with that many broken things ever is, but it was there to be counted. Pumpkinhead stood at the edge of the field with its head dimmed to a coal. It watched the four of them with the attention of a storm deciding where to go next. The grin had not changed. It merely meant something different now that the lights were off. Gunnar closed the journal and wrapped the string around it, knotting it at the same tightness his father must have used. He held it out to Mr. Pike, who didn't take it. "Yours," the old man said. "You spoke it, you keep it. That's the trade this time." Bram rubbed at a smear of ash on his cheek and let it stay. "Do we, all forget now?" Mrs. Crenshaw looked at them with a softness that had nothing to do with kindness and everything to do with truth. "You remember too much to forget," she said. "That will be its own cost." Lyra tied Sarah's ribbon around the iron fence post and pulled it tight. "Then we pay it together." Juno's hand found each of theirs, one by one, and pressed until the bones lined up. "We stay," she said, and the word was heavier than the ring of any bell. Stay meant tonight, and it meant after. Out in the field, the pumpkin's glow faded to ember and then to the idea of heat. It bent as if in a bow, or as if weakened, or as if listening to something underground none of them would ever hear. The stalks around it settled into neat rows that hadn't been neat a minute before. It stepped backward. The fence didn't ring this time. The fog in the rows rose like breath and thinned with the day. The town exhaled. Somewhere, someone laughed like a person who couldn't help it. A siren wound up, then quit halfway, embarrassed. Children found their plastic teeth and clicked them again. On Main Street, the ruin looked like a place where something honest could grow. They walked home through the wreckage, 4 teenagers who were not any longer, the soles of their shoes picking up glitter from crushed banners, ash from floats, dirt from the field. Gunnar tucked the journal into his jacket like a hot coal. Bram let the dead camcorder dangle and decided not to fix it. Lyra rewound a mixtape by feel, the ribbon of it catching for a second, then smoothing. Juno carried the scarecrow stake on her shoulder until the church steps, where she leaned it by the door like a rake after work. At the corner, they paused. The corn made no sound. "Do you hear it?" Gunnar asked. "No," Lyra said, and they stood a minute with that mercy. A wind touched their hair and jackets. Leaves tumbled like coins. The town square glowed faintly under the morning, like a stage after the play is over, set still up, audience gone. Pumpkin Hollow would put itself back together the way it always did. Not perfectly, but enough. The chant would be rewritten, softer at the edges for the children, harsher in the margins for the ones who kept the keys. The field would sleep until it didn't. At the last turn, Juno looked back. In the far distance, a single jack-o'-lantern burned at the field's lip where no one had placed one, the kind of light you see when you close your eyes and press your palms to them. It flared and went out. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. The corn did not breathe. Not today.